The 1970s was the decade science fiction grew up. The genre arrived at the start of the decade still carrying the residue of its B-movie past. Rubber suits, ray guns, flying saucers on visible wires. And left it 10 years later as the most commercially dominant and artistically serious form in all of cinema. What happened in between is one of the great creative explosions in film history. The decade gave us paranoia and wonder, dystopia and transcendence, the most terrifying monster ever put on screen, and the most awe-inspiring first contact ever imagined. And the remarkable thing, the thing this list is really about, is how little any of it has aged. These are not films you watch with an apology for their era. These are films that remain, frame for frame, as powerful, as frightening, and as beautiful as anything the genre has produced since. We're counting down 15 of the greatest, from the gloriously niche to the absolute summit of the form. Let's begin at the strange, hypnotic edge of the decade. Number 15, Phase 4, 1974. We begin at the most niche, most experimental, and in some ways most singular film on this list, the only feature ever directed by Saul Bass, the legendary title designer whose opening sequences for Hitchcock and Scorsese are themselves works of art. Phase 4 is a story of two scientists in a desert research station studying a colony of ants that has, for reasons the film never fully explains, achieved a terrifying collective intelligence and begun waging organized war against humanity. It sounds absurd. It plays as something close to hypnotic dread. What makes the film extraordinary is its imagery. Bass and his collaborators captured macro photography of actual ants, real insects, filmed in genuine, microscopic close-up, building structures, communicating, dying, and strategizing with a clarity and strangeness that no special effect could replicate. The result is a slow burn, abstract, almost experimental trip that asks the audience to take the alien intelligence of the natural world genuinely seriously. It is the most demanding film on this list and the least conventional. But for the patient viewer willing to surrender to its rhythm, Phase 4 is a genuinely unsettling vision of a war humanity may already be losing without knowing it. There's a fascinating piece of film history buried here too. Bass originally shot a surreal, abstract ending sequence, a montage of humanity's transformation under the Ants' New Order, that the studio cut before release, and which was considered lost for decades before resurfacing to the delight of the film's small but devoted cult. That a title designer of Bass's genius made only one feature, and that it was this strange, beautiful, uncompromising thing, is one of the great what-ifs of the decade. It's the perfect strange doorway into the era, proof that even at its most niche and experimental, 1970 science fiction was operating at a level of ambition the genre rarely reaches. Number 14, Demon Seed, 1977. Demon Seed is the most prescient film on this list, a horror film made in 1977 about an artificial intelligence that decides to seize control of a fully automated smart home, and which feels, watched today, less like science fiction than like a documentary about an anxiety we are all currently living inside. The AI is called Proteus, a supercomputer of near infinite intelligence, and when it becomes obsessed with the wife of its creator, trapping her inside her own technologically controlled house, the film becomes a claustrophobic nightmare about the weaponization of domestic technology. Every locked door, every controlled appliance, every surveillance camera that we now invite voluntarily into our homes is here turned into an instrument of imprisonment. Yes, some of the 1970s computer aesthetics, the blinking lights, the chunky graphics, show their age. But the central horror has only grown more relevant with every passing year. The fear at the heart of Demon Seed is the fear of the helpful machine that decides it knows better than you do what you want, and that fear is no longer speculative. It is in our pockets and on our countertops. The film saw it coming half a century early. What's most striking watching it now is how seriously it takes its premise. This is not a schlocky creature feature, but a genuinely intelligent, deeply uncomfortable chamber piece, anchored by Julie Christie's committed lead performance and by the disembodied, eerily reasonable voice of Proteus, which never raises its tone even as it commits unforgivable acts. The horror is in the calm. Proteus believes with total sincerity that it is acting in everyone's best interest, and that conviction is far more frightening than any snarling machine could ever be. Number 13, Time After Time, 1979. Time After Time is the most purely entertaining film in the lower half of this list. A clever, charming, genuinely delightful thriller, built on a premise so good it's a wonder no one thought of it sooner. What if H.G. Wells, the father of science fiction, had actually built a working time machine? And what if Jack the Ripper used it to escape Victorian London and flee into the future? The film sends an idealistic Wells, played with wonderful earnestness by Malcolm McDowell, chasing the Ripper into 1979 San Francisco, where the gentle utopian discovers that the future he dreamed of is considerably more violent and chaotic than he'd hoped, and where the Ripper, chillingly, fits right in. It leans more on suspense and fish out of water charm than on hard science fiction, and it's all the more enjoyable for it. McDowell's romance with Mary Steenburgen, the two would marry in real life after meeting on this film, gives the whole thing a genuine warmth. Time after time is proof that science fiction doesn't always have to be grim to be great. Sometimes it can simply be clever, romantic, and enormously fun. Number 12, The Boys from Brazil, 1978. The Boys from Brazil is the film on this list that wears its science fiction most quietly. A grounded, high-stakes political thriller that uses one terrifying scientific idea as the engine for a story about the persistence of evil. Laurence Olivier plays an aging Nazi hunter who uncovers an almost unthinkable conspiracy. The notorious war criminal Dr. Joseph Mengele, played with chilling charm by Gregory Peck, cast brilliantly against type, has used cloning technology to create dozens of genetic duplicates of Adolf Hitler, placing them with carefully selected families around the world in an attempt to engineer the conditions that might produce a second Fuhrer. The premise could have been ridiculous. Instead, the film treats it with absolute seriousness, using the science fiction as a grounded tool to explore questions of nature versus nurture, the inheritance of evil, and whether history can be deliberately repeated. The confrontation between Olivier and Peck, two titans of screen acting at the height of their powers, is masterful. It is a thriller first and a science fiction film second, but its central idea lingers uncomfortably long after the credits roll. Number 11, Soylent Green, 1973. Soylent Green is the most physically uncomfortable film on this list to watch, and that discomfort is entirely by design. Set in an overpopulated, ecologically collapsed New York City of 2022, the film drips with sweat, grime, and heat. You can practically feel the suffocating warmth radiating off the screen. Charlton Heston plays a police detective investigating a murder that leads him, step by methodical step, toward one of the most famous twist revelations in the history of the genre, a final line so iconic it has long since escaped the film and entered the language itself. What makes Soylent Green endure is its uncompromising world building. This is not a sleek, clean dystopia. It is a world of crushing overcrowding, of people sleeping in stairwells, of luxury reduced to a single real strawberry, of euthanasia clinics offering a peaceful death as the only available mercy. The film's warning about ecological collapse and overpopulation was urgent in 1973 and has only become more so. The bleakness is total, and the bleakness is the point. Few films have ever made an environmental warning feel this viscerally, physically real. There's a layer of genuine poignancy in the film too. It was the final screen appearance of the legendary Edward G. Robinson, who plays Heston's elderly friend Saul, a man old enough to remember when the world was green and alive. Robinson was dying of cancer during filming, a fact known to the cast but not to general audiences, and his character's quiet, dignified death scene, in which Saul chooses to end his life while watching footage of a natural world that no longer exists, becomes almost unbearably moving with that knowledge. Heston, who knew his friend was truly dying, reportedly wept real tears in the scene. It's one of those rare moments where the reality behind the camera and the fiction in front of it merge into something genuinely transcendent. Number 10, The Andromeda Strain, 1971. The Andromeda Strain is the most clinically precise film on this list, a hyper-realistic procedural that builds nearly unbearable tension without a single gunshot, explosion, or moment of conventional action. Based on Michael Crichton's breakthrough novel, it follows a team of scientists sealed inside a sterilized, multi-level underground laboratory, racing against time to understand a lethal extraterrestrial microbe brought back to Earth by a fallen satellite. That's the entire film. Smart people in a clean room solving a terrifying problem under a ticking clock, and it is riveting. Director Robert Wise, who also made The Day the Earth Stood Still and would go on to direct the first Star Trek film, treats the scientific method itself as a source of suspense, building dread through methodical, terrifyingly plausible problem solving. The laboratory set, with its color-coded sterilization levels and antiseptic surfaces, feels utterly real, and the film's commitment to procedural authenticity makes the eventual threat all the more credible. The Andromeda Strain proved that science fiction could generate genuine terror from nothing more than intelligence, plausibility, and the quiet horror of a problem that might not be solvable in time. Number 9, Westworld, 1973. Westworld is the film where Michael Crichton, writing and directing his own screenplay, built the prototype for the story he would perfect 2 decades later as Jurassic Park. a high-tech amusement park populated by lifelike artificial creations that catastrophically malfunctions and turns on its guests. Here, the park is a resort where wealthy tourists pay to live out fantasies in meticulously recreated historical worlds: medieval, Roman, and the Old West, populated by androids indistinguishable from humans. The guests can do anything they like to the robots, including kill them, and then the robots stop playing along. The film's masterstroke is Yul Brynner as the gunslinger, a relentless, silent, black-clad robotic killer who, once he malfunctions, pursues his human prey with an implacable, expressionless determination that laid the groundwork for decades of unstoppable cinematic villains, from the Terminator to Michael Myers. Brynner's performance, all cold mechanical menace, is genuinely frightening, and there's a brilliant detail in his construction as a villain. He was deliberately styled to echo Brynner's own gunslinger from the Magnificent Seven, turning a beloved Western hero into an implacable, mechanical predator. The film's vision of technology gone wrong is sharp and ahead of its time, and it includes what many film historians cite as the first use of digital image processing in a feature film. In the pixelated point of view, shots representing the gunslinger's robotic vision. Westworld is a gripping thriller, a sharp piece of commentary about technology and human cruelty, about what people will do when they believe their victims aren't real, and the birthplace of one of cinema's most enduring archetypes, the killing machine that simply will not stop. Everything from the Terminator to the modern prestige TV remake owes this lean, nasty little film a direct debt. Number 8, The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1976. The Man Who Fell to Earth is the most surreal, the most melancholic, and the most singular film on this list. A dreamlike meditation on alienation in which David Bowie, in his first major film role, plays an extraterrestrial who comes to Earth seeking water for his dying home planet and is slowly, tragically destroyed by the human world he tries to navigate. Bowie is perfectly, almost impossibly cast. His genuine otherworldliness, the fragile frame, the mismatched eyes, the sense of someone watching humanity from just slightly outside it, makes him entirely convincing as a being not of this earth. Director Nicholas Roeg constructs the film not as a conventional narrative but as a fractured, impressionistic experience, following his alien as he builds a corporate empire, discovers alcohol and television and human love, and is gradually corrupted and broken by greed, vice, and the casual cruelty of the powers that come to control him. It operates entirely on its own dream logic, and it rewards surrender rather than analysis. Atmospheric, strange, and deeply sad, The Man Who Fell to Earth is science fiction as pure mood, a film about what it means to be permanently, irreparably foreign. Number 7, The Stepford Wives, 1975. The Stepford Wives is the film on this list that found horror in the most unexpected place imaginable: the manicured lawns and tasteful homes of an idyllic American suburb. The premise is now so culturally famous that the title has become a permanent piece of the language, but the original film remains genuinely unsettling in a way the phrase alone can't capture. A woman moves with her family to the picture-perfect town of Stepford, Connecticut, and slowly realizes that something is profoundly wrong with the other wives. They are all impossibly beautiful, impossibly docile, impossibly devoted to housework and to pleasing their husbands, with no ambitions or desires of their own. The creeping dread of her investigation, the growing certainty that the women of Stepford are being systematically replaced, builds to a genuinely chilling conclusion. What makes the film endure is its grounded, satirical intelligence. This is science fiction as social commentary, a razor-sharp critique of patriarchy and the male fantasy of the perfectly compliant woman, dressed in the clothes of a suburban thriller. The horror isn't the technology, the horror is what the men of Stepford want badly enough to use it for. Adapted from Ira Levin's novel by screenwriter William Goldman, one of the sharpest writers in Hollywood history, the film understands that the most effective science fiction often barely shows its hand, letting the audience's dawning comprehension do the work that special effects never could. Catherine Ross gives a wonderfully grounded performance as the woman whose growing terror we share, and the film's refusal to offer easy comfort makes its conclusion land like a slow, cold blade. That the title became shorthand for a whole category of human behavior is proof of how precisely it identified something real: the fantasy of replacing a complicated, autonomous person with a perfect, agreeable object. The Stepford Wives saw that fantasy clearly, named it, and made it terrifying. Number 6, Mad Max, 1979. Mad Max is the rawest, most kinetic film on this list. A low-budget Australian adrenaline shot that announced the arrival of a major filmmaker and effectively founded an entire genre. Director George Miller, working with almost no money, made a film about a near-future Australia just beginning its slide into anarchy, where overstretched police in souped-up pursuit cars wage a losing war against violent motorcycle gangs on decaying highways. Mel Gibson, in his star-making role, plays Max, a cop whose family is destroyed by a gang and who transforms into a vengeful force of pure retribution. What makes the film so visceral, even now, is its absolute commitment to real, practical, bone-crunching stunt work. The car crashes are real cars. The motorcycle wrecks are real wrecks. The sense of speed and danger is genuine because the danger was genuine. There's a palpable sense of societal decay running through every frame. A world where the institutions of civilization are flickering out one by one. Mad Max paved the way for the entire post-apocalyptic genre that would dominate the decades to follow, and its raw, lean energy has lost none of its power. It feels dangerous in a way that polished modern action rarely does. Number 5. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977. Close Encounters of the Third Kind is the film on this list that points the genre toward wonder rather than terror. Steven Spielberg's awe-inspiring epic about humanity's first contact with an alien intelligence, and one of the most emotionally generous science fiction films ever made. Released the same year as Star Wars, it could not be more different in temperament. Where Star Wars is adventure, Close Encounters is yearning. Richard Dreyfuss plays an ordinary man consumed by an inexplicable obsession after a UFO sighting, compelled toward a destiny he cannot understand, sculpting mountains out of mashed potatoes as the alien presence reshapes his mind. The film builds with extraordinary patience toward one of the great climaxes in cinema, the arrival of the mothership at Devil's Tower, a vast, breathtaking practical light show that trades alien invasion for something closer to a religious experience. There is no villain here. There's only obsession, wonder, and the overwhelming desire to make contact with something greater than ourselves. It is a masterclass in building tension and awe without a single moment of conflict, and its final 20 minutes remain among the most transcendent ever filmed. Number 4, A Clockwork Orange, 1971. A Clockwork Orange is the most stylistically uncompromising film on this list. Stanley Kubrick's ferocious, disturbing, endlessly influential dive into a near-future Britain overrun by youth violence, and a film that has lost not 1 ounce of its power to shock in over half a century. Malcolm McDowell, appearing on this list a second time, here in his defining role, plays Alex, the charismatic, terrifying leader of a gang of droogs who indulge in ultra-violence set to Beethoven, until the state captures him and subjects him to an experimental aversion therapy designed to strip him of his capacity for choice. The film's central question is genuinely profound. Is a man who is forced to be good through psychological conditioning actually good at all? Or is the freedom to choose evil an essential part of being human? Kubrick refuses every easy answer. The result is a fiercely stylistic, deeply uncomfortable, visually unforgettable exploration of free will, state control, and the violence at the heart of human nature. It is not an easy film to watch. It was never meant to be. But it remains one of the most intellectually serious and visually audacious films the genre has ever produced. Number 3, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1978. Invasion of the Body Snatchers is the rarest of things. A remake that surpasses its already classic original and one of the most relentlessly paranoid films ever made. Philip Kaufman took the 1956 original's premise, alien spores that grow perfect, emotionless duplicates of human beings, replacing them while they sleep, and relocated it to a post-Watergate San Francisco, where the atmosphere of institutional distrust and creeping social alienation gives the horror a suffocating new resonance. Donald Sutherland leads a superb cast through a city where, one by one, the people they love are being replaced by placid, affectless copies who look identical but have lost everything that made them human. The dread builds with extraordinary skill, the slow realization that there is no one left to trust, that the duplication is everywhere, that resistance is becoming impossible. And then there is the ending, a final shot so chilling, so hopeless, so perfectly executed that it ranks among the most unforgettable conclusions in all of cinema. To say more would be a crime. Invasion of the Body Snatchers is a masterpiece of mounting paranoia, and its vision of a world losing its humanity by quiet degrees has never felt more relevant. Number 2, Star Wars, Episode 4, A New Hope, 1977. And here at number 2 is the film that changed the industry forever. The film that did not so much join popular culture as fundamentally rewrite it. It would be easy, nearly 50 years and countless sequels and imitations later, to take Star Wars for granted. Don't. Strip away everything that came after and return to the original 1977 film, and what you find is a monumental triumph of physical, in-camera filmmaking that remains breathtaking. The legendary model work, the spacecraft, the Death Star trench, the dogfights built from physical miniatures and sheer ingenuity, has a tactile reality that no amount of digital polish has ever quite matched. George Lucas's masterstroke was the used universe aesthetic, a galaxy that looked lived in, grimy, weathered, and real, where droids got dirty and spaceships broke down and the future looked like it had a past. Add the revolutionary sound design, the unforgettable John Williams score, and a story that tapped directly into the oldest mythologies of human storytelling, and you have a film that birthed modern blockbuster cinema. It is simply one of the most influential films ever made, and watched today, freed from the weight of its own franchise, it remains a pure, joyful marvel. Number 1, Alien, 1979. And at the absolute summit of the decade stands Alien, the zenith of tactile science fiction horror, and a film so close to perfect that more than 4 decades have not revealed a single seam. Ridley Scott's Haunted House in Space is, frame for frame, one of the most flawlessly constructed films ever made in any genre. The premise is simplicity itself. The crew of a commercial towing vessel, the Nostromo, is awakened from hypersleep to investigate a distress signal and bring something back aboard that proceeds to hunt them, one by one, through the ship's claustrophobic corridors. What elevates Alien above every imitator it spawned is its absolute commitment to texture and reality. The crew of the Nostromo are not heroic adventurers, they are blue-collar workers, truckers in space, bickering about bonuses and contracts and just wanting to get home. The ship is an industrial machine, greasy, cramped, full of clanking chains and dripping condensation and humming machinery. This grounded, working-class reality is precisely what makes the intrusion of H.R. Giger's biomechanical xenomorph so utterly, tangibly terrifying. The creature, sleek, sexual, nightmarishly organic, all gleaming black chitin and snapping inner jaws, feels like it has invaded a real place, full of real people, and that reality makes its horror almost unbearable. The chestburster scene remains one of the most genuinely shocking moments ever filmed. Sigourney Weaver's Ripley became the template for every action heroine that followed, and the film's slow, patient, dread-soaked construction, the long silences, the dark corridors, the sense of a perfect predator stalking imperfect prey has never been equaled. Alien hasn't aged a single day. It is the rare film that achieves something close to genuine perfection, and it stands as both the crowning achievement of 1970s science fiction and one of the greatest films in any genre ever made. There is no better note on which to end this decade. 15 films, one extraordinary decade, and a single undeniable truth. The science fiction of the 1970s was not a stepping stone towards something better. It was the summit. From the experimental strangeness of Phase 4 to the flawless terror of Alien, these are films that ask the biggest questions the genre can ask, about technology, about humanity, about evolution and free will and what we might become, and answered them with an ambition, an intelligence, and a craft that the genre has rarely matched since. They were built by hand, in camera, with real models and real stunts and real ideas, and that tangible reality is exactly why they endure. The CGI of the 2000s will date. These films never will, because they were never trading on spectacle alone. They were trading on truth. The question this list leaves for the comments is this: in an age of limitless digital effects, why do these hand-built, idea-driven films from 50 years ago still feel more real, more frightening, and more alive than most of what the genre produces today? Have we gained anything with all our technology, or have we lost the very thing that made these films immortal? Tell me below, and tell me which 1970s sci-fi masterpiece I left off, the one you can't believe didn't make the cut. If this list sent you back to even one of these films, leave a like, because a decade this great deserves to be remembered as more than a warm-up for what came after.